Do you ever wonder what's really going on in government, locally, in the state of Tennessee, and across the country? I'm Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson, and on Tennessee Today, we dive into the issues that shape our communities, from local policy to national debates. Each episode, I break down key topics and issues, share my perspective from over 20 years in the Tennessee legislature, and talk with guests about the decisions that impact your daily life. I hope you enjoy these honest conversations and that they help you stay informed and engaged. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Tennessee Today wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of Tennessee Today. I'm Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson, and today I've had a lot of good guests on the show, a lot of great guests, but today is kind of a personal highlight for me, and that is today I have our former governor, because I put that at the highest level, former governor, former United States Senator, former Secretary of Education, former President of the University of Tennessee, a former lawyer, I don't know, can you ever be a former lawyer? But anyway, I digress. And then also worked with several different presidential administrations. He's a beloved son of the great state of Tennessee, and that's Lamar Alexander. So welcome to the show today.
Bo, great to be on your show. And I've enjoyed your service, and thank you for it over the years.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome. Mine pales in comparison to yours, but we can, talk about that at some point.
Right. You're right in the middle of things, and it's great to have you there.
Well, having you on the show is really special for me for a couple of reasons. One, I want to talk a little bit. Obviously, you've just finished writing a book, and I know you're all everywhere. I told somebody at lunch today, I said, I'm kind of nervous today because I've got Lamar Alexander coming on my podcast. So I said, he's everywhere now. Everybody's wanting to talk to him. That's what I said. Well,
good.
They're really wanting to talk to him about the last 2 or 3 chapters of his book is the way that I've heard it. But we'll get to that. But more importantly, I really just want to talk to you as just an amazingly accomplished Tennessean, and we'll talk a little bit about your life story, and then get your perspective just on governing, and then the politics that goes along with that. And we'll see where this takes us. But again, I am just thrilled to have you on the show. So. For folks who may not know you, and if you're from Tennessee, it's hard not to know you. If you're one of those that maybe's moved here, which a lot of people have. They might not know you. So tell a little bit, who's Lamar Alexander? How'd you get started on this path of the political life that you've led?
Well, I grew up in Maryville, Tennessee, and I suppose my parents respected public life, taught me to respect it.
Did anybody in your family serve in elected office?
My dad was on the local school board.
Okay.
He was a principal, and my mother was a teacher, and Dad was on the school board. And
was he on the school board when he was a principal?
Well, after he was a principal.
Oh, okay.
When I was born, the aluminum company offered him twice as much to work at Alcoa as he was making as a principal. So he went to the aluminum company as a safety engineer.
Some things haven't changed,
right? And then they had a ticket, and as an elected official, they had a ticket of 5 who ran for the Maryville City School Board with the goal of improving the schools. And for 25 years, they got elected as a ticket. And so they hired the superintendent, first professional superintendent, and did a good job of creating one of the best school systems in the state. So, and he was on the Republican Executive Committee, and he would go downtown and talk to the Byrne drugstore crowd about politics on Saturday morning. He took me to the courthouse to meet our Congressman, Howard H. Baker Sr., Senator Baker's father, when I was 10. And I remember Mr. Baker gave me a dime, and I was shocked when I saw him because he was apparently using his high school yearbook poster on his campaign posters. So by that time he was kind of old and fat and wore glasses. But I remember thinking, I've just met the most respected man I'm ever likely to meet other than my father and our preacher. So I was raised in that in that environment of respect for public life.
So were your dad was on the school board, and a lot of people that get on the school board are kind of policy-oriented people towards, school policy. Was your family political? I mean, did y'all have a bent towards, Republican politics versus Democrat politics?
Oh,
or was your dad just trying to be a good steward of the school system?
Well, the latter, but we're Republicans. I mean, my great-grandfather, Lamar Alexander, was asked his politics, and he said, I'm a Republican. I fought for the Union, and I vote like I shot.
Yeah.
So I'm descendant of Lincolnite Republicans on both sides, and in our congressional district, no, we haven't had a Democrat elected to Congress since Lincoln was president. So I grew up Republican, reading the Knoxville Journal, which is the Republican version of the Truth every morning, and Howard Baker, admiring Howard Baker and the Baker family, and
so
that's how I came along.
When you were going through now, where did you go to middle school and high school?
I walked to West Side Elementary School where my father had been principal, and I walked to Maryville High School. That's where I went. I graduated there.
Yeah. So how is it, this is a complete sidebar, but how is it that Maryville and Alcoa have these incredible football teams?
Well, they have a huge amount of community support for the schools. Maryville's been there a long time, about a year longer than the state of Tennessee. But Alcoa basically came at World War I time, and they needed aluminum to make airplanes. And suddenly they were hiring 14,000 people to work at the aluminum plants, and they were paying them steelworker wages negotiated in Pittsburgh, and that was 2 or 3 times as much as anybody else could make. So people were driving 100 miles each way to get jobs there. And so over about 40 or 50 years, it created a good tax base, good jobs, strong families, good schools, and all of that in a tradition of excellence. And they have it academically. Both those schools, Alcoa and Maryville, are among the best public schools in the state. And the football teams are too.
It's unbelievable. I mean, they're unbelievable. And I actually have 2 nieces that live in Maryville.
Yeah.
One of them actually teaches at Maryville High School.
Well, she can probably tell you they have a really good culture there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you go to the academic, and I have several times, but you go to the academic honors banquet at the end of the semester in the spring at Maryville High School, you'd think you were at the football team's banquet because it's, they give it a big award for national Spanish champion, and everybody cheers, and then they give a big one for the.
I love it.
It is good. It's great.
So actually, now you may or may not know, I have a copy of your little plaid book that I keep.
Well, it's important to have.
And for folks who may not know, what is the little plaid book?
Well, it's a collection of about 311.
This will make sense in just a minute.
Sayings, about how to be elected, whether you're running for president of the United States or president of your senior class. And it has such wisdom in it as walk in parades. And then the next rule is, if it's the Mule Day parade, walk at the front.
Right.
So, or Alex Haley's statement, find the good and praise it. Or if you want applause when you speak, seat a few friends in the front row. These are very practical suggestions.
You have one. The reason I thought about that is that you have one there about football games. It's something to the effect
don't go if you're
yeah.
You know why I put that in there? Because when I was a kid, I used to ride the White Star Line bus to UT games in Knoxville, and Governor Clement went and insisted on being introduced when he was running for re-election, and he was booed. And when people go to games, 100,000 people go, they're there to cheer or boo, and might as well boo a politician,
exactly.
Right? As the opposing team. So after that, I said I never want to be introduced at a sports event because.
Yeah, that's
because I thought, here's Governor Clement getting booed in an election, and here 100,000 people driving all back to every little town in Tennessee, all the way across the state, and telling everybody, guess what happened at the football game on Saturday? The governor got booed.
Yeah. That's ego-wise, it's hard for politicians to resist that kind of crowd.
Yeah,
but I think it's wise.
It's wise to do it.
I think that's
just shake hands and make yourself known.
I think that's sage advice. Okay, so you graduate from Maryville High School.
I added one rule to the little plaid book.
Okay.
I heard Vice President Biden spoke at Senator Danny Inouye's memorial service a few years ago, and he spoke mostly about himself. And so I added a rule to the book that said, when invited to speak at a funeral, remember to mention the deceased more often than yourself.
That's pretty good. That's really good. Well, to those, and I pull it out periodically, and I'll get off on a tangent on the little plaid book, and I know that's not what we're here to talk about.
Senator Trent Lott keeps it in his bathroom. He thinks it's good reading.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And you have one in there, and then we'll move on. You have one in there about, is it Mo Brooks or someone who goes in the barbershop?
Mo Udall.
Mo Udall.
Yeah, he's running for president. He walks in, sticks out his hand and says, I'm Mo Udall, running for president. And the barber barely looks up and says, yeah, I know. We were just laughing about that yesterday.
I think that's just classic. And so humbling. True. So you go to Maryville, you graduate from Maryville High School. Where'd you do your undergraduate?
Vanderbilt.
Okay. And was Vanderbilt all male then when you were there?
No. It was maybe 2 or 3 to 1 male.
Yeah.
It was all white, the undergraduate school. There were only a few African Americans in the divinity school, but it was all white.
Why? You're in East Tennessee, and why Vanderbilt?
Well, I applied to UT, Duke, and Vanderbilt. That was my horizons extended about that far, geographically that far. And I had a scholarship, and I got one to Duke, and I called up the Vanderbilt admissions officer and said, I've got $600 to go to Duke. If you'll give me $600, I'll go to Vanderbilt because I'd rather stay in Tennessee. So it was cheaper for me to go to Vanderbilt than UT because I didn't have a UT scholarship. And the tuition at UT was like $200, and Vanderbilt was $600. So
how things have changed.
Things have changed, but I'm glad I did. I preferred to stay in Tennessee, and that's why I went.
Good for you. And then you left Tennessee and went to New York to law school.
I went to New York University for the opposite reason because I'd gotten the political bug already. And
okay, let's stop there. Where did the bug bite? How did the bug bite you?
I'm not sure, but it bit me. Maybe the way my parents raised me, my interest in public affairs. I showed up at Boise State, age 17, with campaign posters already printed for governor, just to show you how. Which must have been
that would have been high school.
That'd been high school. That's when I was 17, and that would have been. And I won the Voice of Democracy contest in Tennessee, so I was kind of on that kind of track, which sounds kind of dull looking back on it. But I wanted to see if I really wanted to live in Tennessee. I'm a 7th generation Tennessean, and whether I really wanted to be in politics. And I thought there was no better place to go to turn my back on all that than New York University at Greenwich Village in Washington Square. My father thought I was
true today.
My father thought I was going to a communist institution.
He did, and you kind of were.
Well, it was very different. I mean, my first visit to New York City was when I enrolled in NYU Law School.
Wow. So I mean, just for somebody fresh out of Vanderbilt that goes to New York, I mean, what is that? What is that like? Did you take the train?
No, I was on scholarship, so I had one round trip ticket a year and $500 in spending money. So it was a good scholarship. That was the reason I went. One reason I went there. So I flew to LaGuardia from Knoxville, and I took a cab down to Washington Square, which is in Greenwich Village, and I tried to find a place to get a meat and 3 dinner, and there wasn't such a thing. It was all exotic food like nothing I'd ever seen before. And then I went up to my room, which looked down over Washington Square, and there were all these strange people. And
what year was this?
This was 1962.
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking, this looks like the springtime when the sun comes out on the decaying wood and all the creepy creatures come out of the wood and start crawling around. And so I went to bed late that night, got up the next morning, they were still out there crawling around. And I was thinking, wow, what have I gotten myself into?
Was there for someone who's young, who's kind of thinking about kind of the path that you've walked, was there someone beyond just your parental and family experience? Was there someone who said to you, "Hey, here's what you need to do. You need to go and what was your major at Vanderbilt?"
Latin American history.
Okay, see that doesn't fit in first law school box, right? That
No,
doesn't fit in that box. So was there someone or some group or organization that said, "Hey, kind of here's what you have to do, and getting a law degree will really help you"? And I mean, how did you?
Not really. I mean, I didn't know exactly what to do after college. There was a assumption growing up in Maryville, and especially in my parents, that I was supposed to take whatever gifts God had given me and do something with it. And so I was trying to figure out what that was. And I didn't know what it was at that time. I knew I had this political interest, this interest in public affairs, but I didn't know what that would lead to. So law school seemed to be a convenient place to go. I used to read books about men I admired to try to understand why they'd been successful, and Sam Houston and George Washington and Billy Graham and Clarence Darrow, the lawyer, was one I read. And all I could figure out was that they all were different. They all were individuals, sort of true to themselves. I thought, well, maybe that's a rule of life I ought to remember. So I was still looking around, and nobody said to me, you need to go run. I mean, when you grow up in Maryville, there are lots of people say, oh, you could be president, or you could be governor, or you could be a senator. They say that. But that's what happens in a small town where everybody pats you on the back and encourages, so that when you graduate, you think, I can do anything. You're just too naive to know what the limits are.
Yeah, yeah. Well, apparently they weren't too far off.
No, and my mother was asked that, and she said, she never told me what to do. She said, I never wanted to tell him what to do. I just wanted to do something good and useful.
That's amazing. So what's your real entree now? Let's say you've graduated from law school now. What's your entree into getting into the political track? How do you?
Well, I kind of stumbled into it. I mean, I've kind of stumbled through 6 decades of a pretty fascinating set of things that most people don't get to do. When I was a senior at NYU, my dean said, well, Judge Wisdom in New Orleans is looking for a law clerk. So I drove up to Yale, where he was making a speech and interviewed, and he said, well, I've already hired a law clerk from Harvard, but I've got a spot for a messenger, and I'll pay you $300 a month and treat you like a law clerk if you'll come. And I thought, well, he's one of the most distinguished judges. So I did. And after a while, I got tired of making $300 a month, so I went down on Bourbon Street and got a job at a place called Your Father's Mustache at night, playing in a band, a banjo band, and I would play the trombone or the tuba or the washboard. One night, Judge Wisdom brought the entire Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals down there, and they're sitting on the front row. He liked to have a lot of fun. They all looked very uncomfortable in this beer-drinking establishment.
Imagine.
But that's how that happened. And he had been a very active Republican leader, active in the 1952 Republican Convention for Eisenhower. And Eisenhower appointed him to the court, and then that court of Eisenhower appointees presided over the desegregation of the South after Brown versus the Board of Education, a Supreme Court decision. And Judge Wisdom wrote the opinion that ordered Ole Miss to admit James Meredith, who was the first black student at that university. So I learned a lot from him about Republican politics, about writing, about courage, about civil rights. He was a very important mentor.
Yeah. And you worked with him for
about a year.
Okay. And then you take that experience and what happens to you then?
Well, then I was headed back to Knoxville to practice law, and Howard Baker was running for the Senate. He had run in 1964 and lost, and he was running again in 1966. So I was finishing my clerkship in the summer of 66. So I wrote Howard Baker and asked if I could meet him to volunteer to work in his campaign. I never heard a word. So I went to see him when I was home for Easter from New Orleans, and he said, well, I don't have any money, so but you can work as a volunteer when you come back. And so, well, I worked as a messenger in New Orleans, I might start as a volunteer. So I became volunteer to his campaign in '66 when he, after he won the primary.
Yeah. Well, now, and of course, now you're going to, of course, push back on this when I say it, so I'm prepared for you. But
Okay.
I mean, up until you came along, no one was more politically revered in this state than perhaps Howard Baker. But a lot of people that are younger or new to the state don't know who Howard Baker was. Can you kind of give Howard Baker and the influence that he had, not just on you, but the influence that he had on the political landscape of Tennessee?
Well, Howard Baker with Bill Brock.
The pushback was I expected you to say, no, I would never, should not be in the same, included in the same sentence with Howard Baker.
Well, I should push back on that, but I just want to save you time. the Howard Baker was a very talented guy who was married to the daughter of Senator Everett Dirksen of Illinois. In fact, in 1960, at the Republican Day at the Illinois State Fair, Dirksen was speaking about why Richard Nixon would be better than Kennedy for president. He said, why? All they can say about John Kennedy is that he was a PT boat commander in World War II. Well, my own son-in-law, and he gave a big flourish and wave to his son-in-law, Howard Baker Jr., who looked like he was about 25, back here was on a PT boat in World War II, and I've never heard anyone suggest he was qualified to serve in any public office. Well, by '66, he was the best qualified Republican to try to be the first one to be elected to the Senate. And the mission was to build a two-party system because we'd had a century of one-party rule, and it wasn't very good for Tennessee. I mean, we had a few, good leaders during that time, but there was a lot of mediocrity, back-scratching, corruption, and by the time we got to the 60s and the 70s, about the time I got elected governor, we were the third poorest state in the union, and I think a lot of it had to do with a lack of inspired leadership. So we were all thinking at the time, it was very, we need to change this. The one-party Democratic rule in the center of Tennessee is leaving out East Tennessee, it's leaving out Memphis, it's leaving out blacks, and we need more competition. So that's what Howard Baker did. And then once he went to Washington and he won, I went with him as his legislative assistant. I began to learn from him about politics in the Senate, and he taught things like the other fellow might be right. It's inconvenient, but he might be, So you've got, if you want a result, you better work with him. Eloquent listening, meaning what Bo is saying to Lamar might not be what Lamar is hearing. I need to listen more carefully. He taught about the Senate. I'm sure this is true in the state Senate too, is the essence of the Senate is relationships, and I watched how he did that. And he always did it ethically, and he had a great ability for persuasion. He was very attractive on television. He was, in the 70s, he was considered for vice president by President Nixon, then by President Ford. And then he made his name when he was in the Watergate committee on Nixon, when he asked the question, what did the president know and when did he know it? He ran for leader of the Senate 3 times, and the third time won by 1 vote. So he was the majority leader of the Senate in the 1980s.
And those of us that are in the political world have seen the spinoffs of the Baker year. I mean, the number of people who've served in public service that were. Did you model yourself after him in any way, or did you just sort of incorporate some of his mannerisms or his characteristics into your style, or did you just?
Oh, I learned a lot from him, and I did. I would have done well to emulate him. I think in public life, just as my dad introduced me to his father, I'd like for our public officials to be someone that we would be happy to introduce our grandchildren to, and hope that they grow up to be like them. So Howard Baker was the kind of person that I would want to emulate, and I'd like to be able to speak as well as he did. I'd like to be ethical like he did. I'd like to be able to persuade other people as well as he did, to work across the aisle like he did. I had my own views. He had his views, but his manner of doing things, the way he conducted himself, his character, his temperament, which I put at the top when I think about public officials, were the kind of I would like to emulate.
Where does your skill for storytelling come from? I mean, I have always said to people who've asked me about you, and we know, I mean, we know each other, and I feel I know you well enough to highlight some of what I feel are your attributes. And I've always said that you have an incredible skill of making a point by telling a story. Where'd that come from?
I can tell you who really helped me with that was Alex Haley, the author of Roots. I was speaking in Clinton when I was governor one night, and he was in the back of the room where he had a farm up there. And afterwards he came up and said, "May I make a suggestion?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "If when you start a speech, you would say, 'Instead of making a speech, let me tell you a story,' someone might actually listen to what you have to say." And I couldn't. Ever since then, I've tried to remember that. I've even started speeches with that story. And I've noticed that if you start a speech with a story, people, their eyes light up and they relax. But if you start as if you're about to make a speech, they kind of slink back in their chairs, and in 10 minutes they're asleep.
Well, you have mastered that.
Well, thank you for saying that. In the book that I wrote, I had a great editor who he didn't write anything, but he gave me a lot of advice. John Meacham helped me find him, but he said dialogue is golden, and I'd kept a diary since 2009. Every day I wrote down, like if I had a conversation, if I was in the room and Senator Corker stood up and challenged President Obama, I wrote that down. Or if President Trump and I were talking, I wrote that down. So in the book, there are lots of behind-the-scenes stories of where I don't just describe what happened. I show what happened, and their conversations. So it's much more interesting to read a conversation or to read a story than it is just to have a description.
Yeah, it is an amazing gift. It's one that I keep trying in my own political life. I keep trying to
Well, just
to
remember
work
what
on.
Alex Haley said.
Yeah, well,
I even found it interesting. I found it helpful actually to start my speeches with that story because it reminds me to tell more stories during the speech.
That's amazing. Okay, so you've worked for Howard Baker. How did you what was your process for running for governor? How did that even come about? I mean, had Winfield Dunn had been governor and
I came back to Tennessee. I worked for Howard, then I worked in the White House for President Nixon.
Okay.
I worked for a man named Bryce Harlow, who was an enormously respected guy, and I was there about 18 months. And I sat right next to him in what is now the vice president's office, 50 feet from the Oval Office, and I really got I was in the College of Wisdom.
What was Nixon like? I mean, really?
Nixon, Mr. Harlow said that he thought Nixon was the most capable person to occupy the office of president. That's what he thought, intellectually. And he was well on his way to being one of the most consequential presidents.
Yeah.
When Watergate happened, he lied about it and he lost the presidency.
Yeah.
But he was comparing, for example, to George W. Bush. George W. Bush was of the 10 presidents I worked with, he was the most normal. I mean, he probably because he was born to it. The rest of us who want to be in that job have to scratch our way up, and along the way lose most of our humanity along the way. But I mean, George W. welcomed being born on third base as an excuse to steal home rather than a weekly therapy session.
Right.
Mr. Harlow thought that he said somebody must have hurt him badly in his youth. And he didn't really trust people. Didn't seem to like people. And so that was the flaw in
Which
Nixon.
seems an irony because I've heard that. It seems an irony for someone in political life because, I mean, those of us in the political world, I mean, how do you not like people?
Well, maybe
And
I'm not sure the answer to that, but it's maybe. I mean, President Obama was sort of an introvert.
Mhm.
He was more he was the smartest guy in the room, but sort of an introvert and pretty partisan most of his time that I worked with him. Clinton, on the other hand, if we were here, he'd be looking you straight in the eye, and you wouldn't think anybody else mattered in the whole world, especially if you were a pretty girl, and he was a great politician. And he liked being around people. And I think Senior Bush liked being around people. Reagan was withdrawn in many
interesting,
ways.
yeah.
In fact, his biographer, Edmund Morris, found Reagan inscrutable. Said he never could quite figure him out.
Huh.
So, they're different
Well,
personalities.
my dad loved Nixon, right? And he was devastated when all of this
Well,
kind
he
of
was off
transpired.
to a great start. I mean, if you think
Yeah.
about it, he opened up China. I mean, only he could have done that because that was against what his base wanted. His base was very conservative. They were for Taiwan. Nixon, Henry Kissinger opened up China. He presided over the end of the Vietnam War. He ended the draft. He passed the Clean Air and Clean Water Act. He was off to a great start.
He was. So how did you end up running for governor? How does that happen to someone who's working in the White House?
Well, I worked in the White House, and then about 1970, Bryce Harlow, for whom I worked, he said to me, "If you're ever going to go home, you should now." He said, "Washington, D.C. is a very sticky place." He said, "I've tried to go home 3 times, and I ended up back here." Eisenhower called him, and he came back on Eisenhower's staffs. Also, I think he must have seen storm clouds coming because Bob Haldeman and John Ehrlichman were very efficient staff guys to Nixon, and they were squeezing out some of the wiser, more mature guys who weren't as efficient. They would think about things before they make decisions. and I think he didn't want me to be caught up in that. So I came back when Winfield Dunn surprised everybody by winning the 1970 Republican primary. His volunteer campaign manager called me and said he had to go back and practice law, Harry Welford. And I came back to Nashville and managed Dunn's campaign in September and October of 1970. And I saw the impact that a governor could have on the state of Tennessee.
But you're in your early 30s?
I was 30.
Yeah.
So I came home there, and I changed my mind. I thought I wanted to be a senator if I got into politics, but I came home and I saw what a governor could do, and I thought that's a better job. That's a better opportunity in public life. Many people think that. Senator Mitch McConnell says any senator who's been a governor who tells you he prefers being a senator will lie about other things.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is from one of your former colleagues and Governor Joe Manchin, who said something to the effect of, "My worst day as governor is better than my best day in the U.S. Senate."
Yeah, many former governors feel that way about
Why
being.
is that?
Well, governors are accustomed to being practical. Like when I was there, if I proposed a better schools program, it was a Democratic legislature. So Speaker McWhorter would come up with a weekly county amendment to my proposal. Well, what was I going to do? Say, well, I quit. No, I had to work with him and amend it and come to a practical conclusion. So governors are accustomed to leading and being practical. They get to the Senate and they despair over a body that operates by unanimous consent, where everybody's making speeches, and a lot of people aren't really interested in getting results. They're just interested in ideology and speeches. Henry Bellman was the governor of Oklahoma and then the senator, and then he went back to being the governor. And he said, being in the Senate is about as exciting as watching a stump rot. And they're not many switch hitters. They're not senators, on the other hand. They're accustomed to making speeches and being ideological, and then when they try to be governor, they try to do the same thing, and they don't do very well because that's not the nature of the job. So it works both ways. It'll be interesting to see. We have lots of senators now trying to be governor this year. That's different. Used to be everybody aimed to be the Senate in the end. Now senators are leaving and running for governor here in Tennessee and
all across the country.
All across the country.
Yeah, yeah. What? So your first run at governor was in what? 74?
74.
All right. Tell me about that.
Well,
not quite ready yet.
I lost. I lost. Well, we had a new Republican Party. I mean, I was 33 years old. Right.
That's what's so fascinating.
I look around. There's not anybody who knew much more about it than I did because it'd been since we elected a governor in 1920 and then another one in 1970, and that was it. So I ran.
Who was your opponent?
Ray Blanton.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That comes back to
him. That was my opponent, and I won the primary, which was a surprise. I beat two good people, Nat Winston and Dorch Oldham, and then in September I got a phone call, and then President Nixon resigned in August, and I remember telling Honey, my wife, I said, "Well, great, that solves that problem," because he was in trouble. Mm-hmm. And then in September, I got a call on Sunday morning from Howard Baker who said, "What do you think about what Ford has done?" I said, President Ford, Gerald Ford was president by then. I said, "What has he done?" He said, "Pardon Nixon." I said, "What does that do?" He said, "It buys a lot of trouble for us." And us meant me. And Republican campaigns sunk all over the country. There were people coming down out of the mountains asking voters, they would say, "Which one is the Republican?" So they could vote against the Republican. Yeah. There were only 12 Republican governors left in the country. We lost seats all over Tennessee. So I lost. But I also lost because I wasn't that good a candidate. I mean, I was kind of a stuffed shirt, people said. So I lost. Yeah. And the Tennesseans said after that, there won't be a Republican governor in Tennessee for 50 years. And I thought, well, that's it for me in politics. Yeah. So I started doing business things.
But that wasn't true because a few years later, you run for governor. And
4 years later, I thought I ran again.
Yeah. And I won't get into all the detail. There's a great book called The Coup that's written about, and you write about it in your book as well.
First two chapters of my book, too.
When you were sworn into office prematurely, I guess would be one way to say it.
Well, 3 days early.
Yeah, because of the Blanton administration thing that Blanton was doing, that kind of thing. So,
well, they were selling pardons for cash.
What did you do? Yeah.
That's what they were doing.
What did you do? Yeah, that's true. Well,
and they had video.
You kind of stopped me right in the middle.
They had videotapes to prove it.
Yeah.
And the U.S. attorney, a Democrat, called me and asked me to take office to stop it because he had pardoned 51 people 2 days before, many of whom the FBI believed had paid cash for their release, and he was about to pardon a bunch more.
So I think you were in the room. As the story goes, somebody had to call Blanton,
right,
and tell him what was about to happen.
Right.
Do you remember how that went?
I remember exactly how it happened. But I mean, this all happened on one day, January 17th, 1979. I got the call from the U.S. attorney about 11 o'clock. And by 5 o'clock, I'd assembled the Chief Justice, the legislative leaders, the Secretary of State, all these people, the Attorney General, all of them Democrats. And we were about to go up to swear me in, and somebody said, "We need to tell Governor Blanton." Yeah. So Speaker McWhorter had his phone number. So he called Blanton at home, and when the governor answered, he said, "Governor, this is Ned Ray McWhorter. General Leach has something he wants to tell you."
I think that's great.
That was the Attorney General. And General Leach said, "Governor, Lamar Alexander is about to be sworn in as governor in the next few minutes." And Blanton said, "The hell you say, I hate to go out that way." And by 6 o'clock that night, I was sworn in as governor.
Yeah. It's
which none of us
But,
wanted to do
right.
and wouldn't do unless, one, Leach ruled that it was constitutional, the Attorney General, and two, that we all did it together. McWhorter at one point said, "You go ahead and we'll back you up." I said, "No, we won't do that. We'll do this
Yeah.
together or we won't do it at all."
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And now, what was the? And then I'll move on. But I think what was the concern that he was going to continue doing these pardons up until you're? I mean, because you're 3 days away from. I mean, what was
This is Wednesday morning when I
Mhm.
got the call. He had pardoned 51 people on Monday night,
Okay.
2 days earlier, including Roger Humphreys, a double murderer, and some. And these were people the FBI had tapes of the exchange of cash for their release. And Governor Blanton's counsel had announced that he had more to pardon, and the names on that, and the FBI had an informant in the governor's office with a list of names that included others that had paid cash for their release. They had videotapes, and of course, a pardon is absolute. Once you grant a pardon, can't be overturned by court, by the legislature, by anybody. You're out.
Yeah, and so that was really the driving force.
The only way to stop Blanton from issuing more pardons and commutations that would be paid for was to remove him from office.
Yeah, it's an amazing story in Tennessee's history.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a good story, but it's an amazing story. The way,
Well,
first of all, people came together.
It's a good story in the way that we came together, because that day of sort of a political bipartisan boot camp, and as you know from your service in the Capitol, for the next 8 years, I worked with the Democratic leaders of the legislature, and we learned to trust each other and to argue our positions and to work things out, and that had a lot to do with auto jobs and road building, paying good teachers more. We had to do all that together, and we learned to do it together.
Yeah. So you spent 8 years as governor, and then you decide to run for president at that point?
No, I went to the University of Tennessee and was president, and then President Bush asked me to be the education secretary.
Okay.
So I was only at UT 3 years, and then I was in Washington with Bush.
Incidentally, that's the first time you won't remember, but the first time that I ever met you personally, I was on the UT Alumni Board of Governors. And
you must have been a very outstanding student.
Well, we used to go to, we went to Gatlinburg.
Yeah.
And had the annual meeting or whatever, and that's the first time I ever met you there. I was very impressed.
Well, good, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Clearly,
remembering.
you're on my podcast.
Yeah,
It's been
that's
very
right.
impressive, right? So your first run for president.
Yeah, that was 96. Well, I came home from Washington. Clinton had beat Bush. Clinton and I had grown up together in politics. You know, he was elected governor the same day I was. We worked together. We were both kind of competing to see who could be the first president of our generation to be the president. And he won. And so I thought, well, I'll see if I can be the second by beating him. And so I started in 1993, and I visited Iowa many times. Honey went 80 different counties. And the long and short of it was, while I was behind at first, I can still remember the first poll we took in Iowa. I'd been governor, cabinet member, all this stuff. And Whit Ayers, the pollster, said, "Governor, this is the professional challenge of my career." I said, "Oh," said Bob Dole, 54%, Alexander, 3%, margin of error, 4. And this is 6 months before the Iowa caucus. So I thought, well, yeah. So we went ahead, and I did well in the Iowa caucus, came in third. And in New Hampshire, I came in almost second. If I'd come in second, I could have kept going. So I got that far. And then the second time I tried to run in 2000, I lasted about as long as the Wright brothers' first airplane flight. And
I mean, what's it like to run? I mean, just I can't even imagine trying to organize how to run for president of the United States.
Well, that's a very perceptive comment, because one way to think about it is the difference between running for governor, which is a pretty big undertaking, and running for president is the difference between an 8th grade basketball game and the NBA finals. I mean, it's the ultimate startup. You start up from scratch. Got to have a tough skin, a lot of time, a forgiving family. You've got to raise a lot of money, and it's like the NFL or the NBA. You've got to be pretty good to succeed.
Yeah. I think of everyone that runs. Some people like a George W. Bush that kind of have an advantage on folks just because they've grown up in it.
He had
an
advantage, but he was a terrific candidate. I mean,
Yeah.
He was very well organized and he was very personable.
Yeah. Just the scale, I guess, is what, when I think about it, I just try to think of the scale of that.
It's like starting General Motors from scratch.
Yeah. Wow. So you run for governor, run for president a couple of times. It's not successful. When did the wheel turn that you decided you wanted to run for the U.S. Senate?
Well, I retired from politics permanently for the second time after I had lost the presidential races, and I had nothing to do. I was wallowing around the way you do when you lose a race, and I got a call from the dean of the Kennedy School at Harvard who asked me to come up there and be on the faculty. And I declined. I was watching an NBA basketball game that night, and Hubie Brown said, Kobe would be a much better player if he'd quit trying so hard, just let the game come to him. And I thought, well, maybe that's good advice for me. So I called the dean back, and I went to Harvard for 2 years and taught a class in the American character. And then in the second year, Fred Thompson suddenly decided he wasn't going to run again. And I ran for his seat and was elected to the Senate in 2002.
Yeah. So you've been a governor, and I know we're getting probably up against time here. You've been a governor, you've been a U.S. senator. I have contended that there's a different leadership style that goes with being in the executive branch.
Oh yeah.
Being in the legislative branch. You've experienced both. What would you say as an executive branch person your leadership style was, and then as a legislative person your leadership style, or were they the same?
Oh, very different. One was Moses, and the other was drum major in a marching band. Think of it that way.
Yeah.
Moses in the sense of saying, we're the third poorest state. That's the goal. Our strategy for fixing that is to recruit the auto industry, and that's the second thing you do. And then the third thing you do is persuade at least half the people you're right. Or we got to fix the roads to get the Saturn plants here. So we're going to have a huge road program, and we're going to double the gas tax to pay for it instead of add any debt. You're a finance guy, you know about that. And that requires a lot of persuading people that you're right. All the Republicans, by the way, voted for that at the time. So that's the Moses style. The senator, very different. You have to line up the marchers in the marching band, select the music, lead them, try to keep them from marching into the ditch on the left or the right-hand side of the road, and often pick a couple to march out front as soloists and hope everybody gets to the same place at the same time, and that it's the destination that you want to go. So it's a much messier operation, and it works much better when the executive is providing the Moses style of leadership. The government works best, it seems to me, when the governor proposes or the president proposes, and then the legislature responds and modifies and debates and chews it over, and then they come together and say, okay, now we've got a result most of us can vote for and most people can accept. That's the ideal way to govern.
If you were asked, and maybe you have been, how would you describe your leadership style?
Set a goal, develop a strategy to reach the goal, like pay good teachers more for teaching well, and then use plain English and every thing I could think of to persuade at least half the people I'm right.
Yeah.
Which would try to persuade the legislature I'm right. I think those are the key things.
Yeah. So you would be sort of would you say you're a consensus builder?
Well, I'm a result achiever, but I've found if I wanted to get a result, people say, well, you're a bipartisan person. No, I'm not a bipartisan person. I'm a result person. And if I want a result, I'm going to have to persuade the Democratic legislators to have a consensus with me about what to do. Or I'm going to have to get 60 votes in the Senate, which I know how to count. We've never had 60 Republican senators, so I have to get some Democrats.
Yeah.
So I want a consensus, but my goal is to get a result. My goal is to get the auto industry, pay the teachers more, get the drugs into the hands of adults, get the decisions out of Washington back home. To get that result requires bipartisanship, it requires civility, it requires relationships, and it requires as much consensus as you can get.
Yeah. So you are a seventh generation Tennessean.
I am.
And this is one of those kind of questions that may be difficult to answer, but I want to try and stretch you with it. What is your hope for Tennessee? You've lived in Tennessee. You've made a lot of decisions that you've made in life have been apparently around your heritage here in Tennessee. You take great pride in being an East Tennessean, as all of us in East Tennessee do. You left early in your life. You left to go to New York to decide, do I want to be outside the state of Tennessee? You came back to Tennessee, worked in Tennessee, became governor of Tennessee. What's kind of your hope for Tennessee?
Well, as governor, I had two hopes. One was to improve family incomes, number one, and to improve self-confidence, number two, because by self-confidence, I meant, celebrate what we have. I remember when a lady told me in Nashville, we had Charlie McCoy play the harmonica after dinner for the General Motors people. She said, I'm so embarrassed. Why didn't you offer them Chopin? I said, why should we offer them average Chopin when we've got the best harmonica player in the world?
Yeah.
So Chattanooga has done a great job of that over the last 20, 25 years with its visioning process and celebrating what Chattanooga has. Hadn't tried to be like Nashville or Memphis or Knoxville. It's been itself. Nashville's done that. Knoxville's beginning to. Memphis. So what I hope the state continues to do is improve family incomes. As far as the Chattanooga area goes, you're well positioned to do that, especially with your new focus on quantum research and job growth. And then self-confidence. By what I mean by that is look around and celebrate what's special about the place where you are. I mean, if you're in Chattanooga, it's the riverfront. If you're in Nashville, it's the songwriters. If you're in Memphis, it's Beale Street. If you're in Knoxville, it's the Oak Ridge Laboratory and the Smoky Mountains. So there's no need to try to be like somebody else. Celebrate who you are, and that usually that confidence creates higher goals. If you create higher goals, you reach higher goals. So I think if we just do that, I guess finally I'd like to Tennessee say what it is. I mean, Tennessee's doing pretty well. It's a place people want to move to, want to live in. People are generally nice to each other in Minnie Pearl way.
Yeah,
and people like that. And
I don't think, those of us that are local, those of us that have lived here all of our lives, it's hard for us to know that. But when people from the outside come into our state, they see a hospitality that maybe we don't see within ourselves.
Well, and particularly in this digital democracy where there's so much coarseness and vulgarity and polarization because of the social media, to be in a place where people actually talk to each other, tell stories, get along, work things out, that's a pretty nice place to find. And it'd be good if we stayed that way.
Well, I'm going to get you to sign my book.
I'd love to do it.
While we've got the camera going, I'm going to do it on camera here. And I'm going to give you got a pen?
I've got a pen.
I'm going to give you I want a thick writing pen so I can see it.
Senator Bo Watson.
That's it. Yeah. Wow.
Now, how long have you been in the Senate?
I'm beginning my 22nd year, but I'm up for re-election this year in November. I don't have a primary, so I'm fortunate to that end.
No, that is good.
Yeah.
But good luck to you.
Thank you.
Your experience in finance, one of the things about Tennessee is one of the few states in the country that has had, I think it's still true, no road debt or almost no road debt.
Zero.
And all the other states, most of them, they raise all this gas tax money and it goes to pay interest and principal. We spend it on roads.
Yep. No, we still pay like you did, we still pay cash for our roads. It's getting harder and harder, though, to be honest, because they're getting more
worse
and more,
and worse.
more and more, more and more expensive. Well, this has been an absolute joy for me to have the opportunity. Lamar, you are a Tennessee treasure. You really are.
Well, you're nice to say that.
Well, it's just the facts are what the facts are. And so I want to thank you for taking time out of your really busy schedule to be on the show today. So, folks, this has been another episode of Tennessee Today. If you enjoyed today's episode, which you had to have enjoyed, please click the subscribe button or like button at the bottom. It helps us get the show out to more people. And I hope you really will take time to listen to Lamar Alexander. It's a great story of a seventh-generation Tennessean who has great aspirations for our state in the future. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bo.
You're welcome.
Great to see you.